Yo, 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 welcome back to the Further Your Lifestyle podcast, conversations on lifestyle, passions, and hustles. My name's Chris Furlong, I am your host, and I am once again super thrilled to have you back here and to introduce you to our guest for this week, and that is Jon Kuhn. Now, I met Jon originally back via YouTube. It was probably about a year ago almost, maybe a little less, and it was actually probably because of his running and just, the content that he was creating at the point in time. And I think one thing that has really stuck out for me of why Jon has resonated with me and why I wanted him as a guest is just his approach, his perspective, and his way of doing things. Now, he has a strong yearning of curiosity, of finding purpose, and exploring things in different ways in terms of perspective and, challenging the norm once again. And like any of us, he is, doing life, living life, and along the way, he shares his journey. He brings together small pockets of inspiration, stories, and experiences to share the realities of life. And at the end of the day, this is all about trying to live a life of purpose. So in this episode, we do explore just that, the journey to find ourselves, the battle of many distractions, and I guess the side quests in our journey to pursue life and pursue purpose. So we do go through quite a lot in this episode, very deep, lots of conversation, and the thing I love about Jon so much is he's just down to earth, he's realistic, and he brings great conversation, which maybe is in a perspective which you had never thought of in the first place. So super thrilled to have this episode, super thrilled to have you listening to it, and I think there's something here of value for all of us to take away. So however you like to listen, whether it is with a cup of coffee, cup of tea, however it is, get comfy, get cozy. We are on YouTube, we have the video experience, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts, we are on Apple Podcasts as well. So however you like to listen, let's get into it. Welcome, Jon, to the Further Your Lifestyle podcast. Really do appreciate you being here, mate. How are you going this morning for you?
I am I'm going. I'm excited to do this with you. It's one of those things where you consume someone's content, you start talking online, and we've talked only once prior to this.
Yeah.
You've engaged in a charity that I was doing, so it's like I feel like I know you, and I it's such a fascinating thing, and the world we live in is confusing and also beautiful.
You've summed it up really well in terms of how we did meet, because I have reflected so much over the last year and a half, I guess, almost, since I guess the big C kind of came into the world, and that's when we've been seeking all this connectivity and wanting to seek and have that connection with other people. And you being one of those people, kind of stumbling upon you, just on YouTube. And I know we were kind of discussing of how that did happen and how we found each other. And there's probably some crossovers of who, which content creator kind of made us find each other. But yeah, it's exactly that. Now that we've been having so many conversations, and they weren't even face-to-face conversations, that we just kind of connected and hit it off. And I feel like I know so much about you because the same thing, consuming your content. And I mean, that's why we're here, to talk about the content that you do create, but also about you and all the different things that you have been doing. So I'm very keen to have the audience understand who you are, what you're all about. And I know that's very broad, and we'll dive into that, in details as we go through the episode. But tell us, who are you and what are you all about?
I think answering who you are is, one of the most difficult questions to answer since the beginning of sentient thought. And funny enough, I was sitting at a Taco Bell having a vegan burrito, forced myself to take a break, and I was like, Jon, you have to get it out of your head. Like, you have work, and one of the biggest struggles for me is like an entrepreneur. And so when it's creating content, is like figuring out who I am in this digital space. And who I am in the digital space, I have a couple like things. I have Awoken Dudes, which is me trying to just not care and to be genuine and to
Yep.
put that stuff out into the world. And I talk to other men about their emotions, and I try to talk to men who are like being vulnerable and kind of like paving the way forward as we get out of this like extremely oppressive patriarchal nonsense where men are forced to have women have a seat at the table. And most of the guys I talked to probably would have been okay with this in the 50s or 60s. And a lot of us are honestly trying to break the chains of oppression that our fathers gave to us, that their fathers, fathers, and fathers
Yeah.
gave to them. So there's Awoken Dudes is me being vulnerable and just talking about existing in the world as a man emotionally. And with my personal brand, my name, Jon Kuhn, on my YouTube channel, what I think I'm trying to do there is cultivating a space for people to, I hope at the end of my videos, people are like, okay, I can accomplish something I didn't think was possible. And I'm going to go forward into the world doing so using this mindset.
Yeah, that's deep. There's some good contrast there, but I think, together it really does sum you up really well, right? Because at the end of the day, you do like to share, whether it is the vulnerability side of things, the emotional side, but I find that you speak a lot of truth, which at the end of the day probably brings a lot of controversial topics to life, which is why I enjoy your content, because you bring such fresh perspective in everything that you're doing, right? And I know that you've got a background in a lot of different things. You've done a bit of comedy, you've done photography, videography, you're doing blogging. So you've even mentioned that now you've got your podcast. So you're doing so many different things, and you're a dad. And so, I mean, obviously all of that has come from somewhere. So can you take it a step back and, even, you can be very light on this, or you can go into detail if you like. But I guess if you think about your upbringing or background, what did you study at university? Did you even go to university? Did you study, some of those kind of things, to then what got you to where you are now around, going into comedy, going onto YouTube, and then having a videography business and all that jazz, because there's so much there. But does that even tie back to something from the early days, or is it completely different?
Oh man, this is turning into a therapy session real quick. I'm trying to think of the best way to answer this. I have reflected a lot on just like the way I view the world right now, and I feel like I'm in a place where I feel confident in what I'm doing.
Yeah,
and I'm becoming painfully aware of how much of a victim mindset and mentality I had for a long time. I feel like I've started like breaking down the walls, or like escaping the prison that I was inside of, right?
Yep.
And a lot of the victim stuff, mentality, I spent a lot of time thinking about if my parents just would have let me explore this route or this avenue. And a lot of that exploration that I feel like was stifled was around creativity.
Yep.
However silly it sounds, I remember drawing a shirtless boy when I was like 4 or 5, because we'd gone to the pool that day at my babysitter's house.
Okay.
And my babysitter, my mom, got mad at me because I drew the boy had nipples on. And like there was other detail, but they're like, you can't draw that. And I was like, well, it made me feel so shame around creativity. And then every time I tried to explore creativity going forward through high school, like I lived in a super small town where like they were very openly racist, most of the people in the town. There was an anti-homosexual campaign going around my senior year for the big debate. One side was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, versus like the dirty liberals. Like the government teacher in my high school would always talk about like how unproductive liberals were and how unproductive hippies were. And this drove me crazy. And it made me think I was a bad person for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the onset of middle age or whatever it is I'm going through has like, I've accepted the fact that I'm going to die one day, and it's a beautiful thing, right? But since I'm aware of that every day, and they say that a person has 2 lives, right? And the second one begins once you realize you only have one.
Yeah.
So at some point, I realized that maybe it was like all the psychedelics in my early 20s, but I was like, I'm no longer going to kill my curiosity.
Yeah.
So I've been very curious for the last few years, and now I'm developing a business mindset. So I'm trying to figure out how to like harness and like foster like creativity that is concentrated in like a few areas. So that way I can get better at it to do it for a living. And I've done that with filmmaking, but I want to continue exploring and being curious. Like I've had an urge to create, and I have off and on my whole life. I don't remember necessarily when it started.
Yeah, but oh, wow. I mean, there's so much there, and the first thing that I kind of wanted to pick at was you mentioned that from your upbringing and how maybe your creativity was kind of pushed away or held back, or you can't do this, and then you had the influence or people around you making statements or suggestions of what was good, what was bad, and not necessarily dictating, but I guess it has influenced you of what you thought was good, bad, ugly, truth, whatever, right? And I think that's relatable to a lot of people, and probably people listening to this, whether you're early days into your journey of life, or if you're older, I think it's very relevant to everyone, because we are our, yes, we are our own creations of who, what we define ourselves as. But a lot of the time that takes a very long time to even figure out. And we probably still continue to figure that out as we go. But a lot of it comes from, our upbringings, who our parents were, what they taught us, what they thought was right and wrong. They're just trying to do their best and whatnot. But then you have all the influences of all the rest of the ecosystem, right? And I know we could chat on this for hours, but it's really interesting how you said that, because now you're saying that all you're wanting to do is create, open up, share, release, which I think is really, really good, right? Because it's the same for me at the moment, me doing this podcast. It's things that I wanted to do from years ago, but I was held back, or I didn't do it, or, me jumping in and trying new things, or even doing Pokemon cards and things like that. I wasn't able to do that as a kid. Nothing against my parents for that. They did what they thought was right. But now I'm able to dabble in that, have some fun, and, just enjoy it, and, create and share with others while doing that. So I think as we grow up, we mature, we can have those understandings, and we can also have the maturity to understand why some people made those decisions. Of course, then there's times thinking, why did that? And we have this regret or resentment against them, which, sometimes isn't obviously going to be healthy. Now, you mentioned about your creativity and how, you wanted to make sure you're not killing off your curiosity, right? And I think everything that you're doing, whether it has been, from comedy to, you're doing video work, you're doing YouTube, all of that comes down to creativity. Even you blogging, even you talking and having a conversation, it's the creativeness of maybe your perception. It's the creativeness of you just, dabbling into something and just going down a rabbit hole into, oh, this sounds interesting. So I think it's really cool how you've kind of like turned everything around and, started to really, and I guess it's a really good segue of the first thing I really want to touch on is, it's starting to really help you determine maybe what is an idea or what a life of purpose even is, right? Because a lot of the time we think we know what our purpose is versus we have no idea. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer with that, right? And I'm really curious to hear from your perspective, kind of summing up what you just mentioned about, you discovering who you are and what you're wanting to do now is, well, what is the idea of a life of purpose, right? Because I feel like maybe you're at that point in life where you have become more self-aware and you're starting to realize, as you mentioned, that, you do have the one life, you're going to make sure you're making the most of it. So does that mean you know what a life of purpose is? Do you know what your purpose is? Or is that something you're kind of just really wanting to make sure that you're now focusing on?
Man, you ask everyone these intense metaphysical, like we're gonna have a panic attack kind of questions.
Yes and no. I mean, look, to be honest, if I asked everyone these types of questions, I wouldn't get the answers that I'm not saying there's wrong or right answers to it, right? But I know you're the type of person wanting to have this conversation. And that's exactly it, right? There is no right or wrong answer to this. And I think that's why it's a really good conversation to have, is because there's people that, at a very young age, probably the audience that I would hope that is listening to this is, late teens, early adulthood, that they're starting to understand that talking about purpose and life, it's scary stuff, or it's completely irrelevant to you, right? Because you're just wanting to get out into the big wide world and make your mark. But until you realize those things, and whether it's with maturity or realization, or, you have a big pivot in your life, that's when you all of a sudden start to realize, oh, crap, now I need to start doing something, or I want to start doing something. And people look at it both ways. They can look at it like, I regret wasting all this time, or they look at it with a pure opportunity of like, this is what I can do, and let's ride the wave. And it's a mixed bag of emotions, but I think it's important that it's a conversation that needs to happen for everyone. The sooner, I think, is better, because then you've got more time to be able to, make mistakes, learn, fail, and continue to show up and make things happen.
You're beautiful. Yes. I'm sorry for kind of giving you a hard time. I was only joking. I was also trying to like give myself a second to think about like the best way to answer. And comedy is my way of deflecting. I've used that my whole life. Side note, I do not hold any resentment towards my parents. And you're talking about understanding and the 4 agreements, and like in that book they talk about realizing that it's not about you. right? And the art of letting go. I have come to that point, and my mother and grandmother like facilitated a place for me to like edit with like VHS tapes and like explore some creativity later in life. There was just a lot of like oppressive energy, and I
Yeah.
don't, like I said, like I don't think that's their fault.
Yeah.
To get back onto answering the question of purpose, how do you find it? I think that we can talk about this, for eons. Like we talk about
Yeah.
this till our last breath. And there, like you said, there's not a right or wrong answer. If I were to coach somebody, and I've done some mindset coaching recently with some of my friends, because people have talked about like watching me go from being like a loser dad, a fat dad, to like being who I am now. And they're like, what do you do? And it's about like developing different habits in your life. And I feel like finding your purpose can be a habit too. And maybe that's making it too methodical and kind of demystifying it. But one of the practices I would say to anyone listening to this who is struggling to find their purpose um, would be to start by just asking yourself who you can help, right? Because we're all somewhere in life. We're all, and that's just as like simple as it sounds. But you could be in a tribe on like an island with 100 people. Like you can't help that you were born there, right?
Yeah.
Like I can't help that I'm born like a very handsome straight white man in Indiana. No, but you can't control what you're born into. But what you can control is the people around you. And when you give to somebody, I used to think it was selfish to give to somebody and to like let that feel good. But there's a reason that's the best feeling ever. And I think
Yeah.
that if you like study any kind of evolutionary psychology, we start to understand that giving feels good, because if you give, then you're a part of the tribe. You are
Yeah.
allowed to exist in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And the more you give, the higher up in the hierarchical ladder you go. If you're giving to everybody, and pardon my crude macho like analogy, but if you're a guy and you're a warrior, you're the best warrior who
Yeah.
provides relatively the most, you get access to the beautiful women, and 3 or 4 at a time, because
Yeah.
you can protect more people, you can give more.
Yeah.
There's a reason that plays out naturally.
Yeah.
So whatever situation you're in, no matter how bad it is, if you haven't stopped to think who you can help, do that. And I think if you explore that curiosity, the philanthropic curiosity, that's going to lead you from where you're at now, feeling like you have no purpose, to waking up with a defined purpose every day. And then
Yeah.
along that path, curiosity will happen, and explore all of those avenues. Bayo Miles, are you familiar with this chap?
So who was it?
Bayo Miles.
No.
He's a filmmaker from Australia.
Oh,
He kind of
okay. Bo
Bo
Miles.
Bo Miles.
That's
Sorry,
why I'm
Bo,
like,
not
I
Bayo.
know half the name, and I'm like, hang on, does he? Okay, yeah, yes. Love his work. Very, very good. Very good.
He said something very profound in his last film. There's like 7 junk films,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was talking about filmmaking, and what you have to do to be a filmmaker is pick up the camera whenever you don't feel like it, and then explore a storyline, even if it feels like it's going to be inconvenient or hard.
Yeah. Okay.
So to find purpose, you have to look for it, even if you don't feel inspired to do so. And I think the way you do so is by figuring out who you can help. And then as you are going down that philanthropic path, there are going to be opportunities that arise. For myself in my life, anecdotally, when I got a DSLR, no one was going to give me money. And I didn't have
Yep.
enough self-awareness at the time to be like, okay, just because you have a professional camera, it doesn't mean you're good. I sucked, and I'm still getting better. But I wasn't thinking about how these people that I'm pitching to have people pitch to them all the time.
Yeah.
So out of like circumstance, I started just volunteering at my son's school and doing this volunteer work. And that led me to meeting Neil. And then doing some work with Neil allowed me to create some videos
Yep.
that had so piqued some interest in other people.
Yeah.
And that all came from like helping and serving my community.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's obviously there's so many different ways we could talk about this, but I think playing back what I took from that was especially the giving part and finding purpose. If you give or if you seek, go out into that area, you're going to find it, right? And I think it's really interesting because when you're giving, you're giving someone value, right? But at the same time, you're feeling valued, right? So it's kind of like it's a double whammy, or it's a win-win, because you're going out helping someone else, or giving purpose, or feeling with purpose. All you're really doing is giving and helping someone else, but you're giving them value. You're giving them your time, you're giving them effort, whatever it is, right? But then you feel great because all of a sudden you feel valued because what you've done. Yeah, you might get a thank you, you might not get a thank you, but you're going to feel like, yeah, this was good because I know I've gone in here and, given my 110% of my heart, or, my intent. So you're really basically giving back to yourself as much as you are giving to the other person. And you're right. I think giving that value, helping others, and helping others can be defined in so many different ways, it's a very great way to define purpose. Because I think a lot of the time we think, oh, I need to go out and, yeah, I need to be known to the world, or I need to be, the best doctor here, or I need to be whatever it may be. Well, yes, they've all got purpose. They've all adding value. They're all, changing someone's life. But even to bring it back to as simple as being on YouTube, if you've got 20 people showing up and watching your videos, that's 20 people that are in front of you, like as if it's a classroom. When was the last time you sat in front of 20 people and had a conversation and people listened, right? And I know we chatted about this when we last caught up, but I think that's something which I think we need to take more perspective of, and understand that, just because you've got one person listening and you don't have the tens of thousands of people listening that other people have, that doesn't mean you're not bringing purpose. It doesn't mean that you're not sharing value to other people. It's just not on scale, right? But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be about quantity. I think it should be more about the quality, right?
Right. Yeah, 100%. And the model that I was going on a soliloquy about applies to business too.
100%.
You can't control what market you're in. You may want to desperately be I'll use my son for an example. We were moving into this new house, and I was like, I'm going to give him a loan for money to buy a gas-powered lawnmower. Okay. And he was going to pay me back, and we were building on a structure. We were talking about how much he could charge for lawn care. We're talking about setting up his email. And then we move in, and there's some retired guy. Fuck this guy. He killed my son's dream. He's a retired guy who loves to cut lawns, and he cuts everyone's lawn for free. So what's my son gonna do? Like, never have a business? Like, if he wants to have a business, he has to figure out some other demand in the market.
So while we're on this tangent, then, so what is your son done about this then?
Nothing currently, because he just started cross country and he's doing taekwondo, and he's busy all the time. But we have talked about doing some like Pokemon trading cards, and we've got some like video game stuff. So maybe getting into Flip or whatever. I'm just trying to get them to understand the exchange of money and value.
100%. But I think one thing that make sure that you might have already done it and challenged yourselves to do is, have you had a conversation with the guy?
No, I met him for the first time this morning.
Anyway, we don't have to dive into that, but this is the thing, right? I think
point being, there are a lot of different avenues to explore, and you have to figure out how to serve somebody, whether it's spiritually or with business, right? If no one needs what you're doing, then you can't find your purpose. Like, you have to figure out what people need to like business or to have purpose.
Yeah, because I mean, look, once again, kind of going off a tangent, but the way I took from that is, and I look at things completely different, and so do you, right? But you said there's an old man, right? And you said he was retired, is he? Like, right? So what I took from that was, well, obviously he's got so much spare time that he likes to be able to give back and help other people, which means if he's really good at mowing the lawns, that's probably the best person your son could be hanging around if he wanted to scale his business, because he's going to want to be able to teach someone. He's going to want to be able to have someone else that's got an interest in it. And your son can take and absorb all that very quickly, and naturally just take over and learn those skills, working with him for free, as like what you did with, doing some of the editing for the school and things like that. Once again, it's free learning, but you're going to be able to then take that and be ahead of the next guy on the next street that isn't doing it for free, but charging people, but your son can come in and do a better service, right? So I think this, and I think it's a really good example, because that's exactly, we can look at things in so many different ways and avenues, and it really comes down to how you tackle it, how you approach it, and how you pivot, because not any way is going to be perfect, and not every way is going to be the right way either. But I think it's very interesting, as you said, how we kind of then, develop and manage that curiosity or opportunity in some sense, will, obviously have different results or consequences as we continue to pursue purpose or find what that purpose looks like.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the story of the shoe salesman in Africa?
It sounds familiar, but please enlighten me.
There's a shoe salesman. He's in Africa. He goes into this village. No one has ever worn shoes. This guy is having like the hardest time. He's like trying to sell people shoes. He's like, this will make your life better, and no one wants to buy it. He gives up pretty quickly. And he's leaving town, and on the way out of town, he sees another shoe salesman. He's coming into town. This guy's all like chipper, like, oh my gosh, life is great. And the guy who's leaving town says, I'm just going to give you a warning. Everyone in that town has never even heard of shoes. They don't care. If I were you, I would skip that town. And the eager salesman, the optimistic salesman, is like, oh, a bunch of people that I can teach and they can learn about the wonders of shoes. And he goes into the town, holds a few seminars, teaches people like the benefits of wearing shoes, and sells to everybody in the town, right?
Yeah.
It's just a matter, like you said, of seeing the opportunity.
That's exactly right. And it's, once again, it's perspective and how we approach things differently, because it's kind of like how when I'm doing the reselling, one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? And in that perspective, he saw the opportunity where someone else saw like, this is a dead end and I'm going to fail. So it really does come down to mindset, understanding, education, what you've learned, and there's so much to that. So look, I mean, I know we can talk about purpose for so long, so I want to bring it back to you. So I guess, if you could summarize in very short form, what does a life of purpose look like for you? Like, do you know what your purpose is currently, or do you know what that looks like and what you're trying to pursue it?
I have a very serious purpose, and it's defined, naturally by my family and my partner. I guess I could choose to not be a dad. I could choose to leave my fiance and her stepdaughter. But my purpose has become simplified with them because I don't want to overthink it. I love them and I want to protect them. I would die for every single one of them without pause, right? So it's just holding myself accountable and always turning the attention back to myself and asking myself in every situation, what is the most you can do to make this situation the best for everybody around you? And anytime there's a snafu or there's a problem, instead of blaming other people, my role as a leader is to look back and say, what could I have done to make that differently? Even if it was like 2 days earlier, I didn't get something done, and then that's why we're running late to get out the door now.
Okay.
So my purpose is honestly just to be the best version of myself that I can be for my family.
Yeah. No, look, it's. I feel like people are probably thinking, well, that's cliche, but at the same time, I feel like it's actually quite hard to say that, because in some people's perspective, it might be cliche. It's like, oh, to be the best person you possibly can. But I think people need to understand, well, a lot of the time, coming back to what we originally said around purpose, it is about giving value to other people or helping other people, right? And by you doing that, you're ensuring that you value yourself, or you're giving yourself the value, right? And I think, I mean, the next question I was going to ask you actually was like, so why do you do it, or who do you serve? And I know we talked about that last time, but you kind of already answered that, that it really comes down to, yes, your family, your close loved ones, and in that ecosystem. But then it really comes back to yourself. Like, your purpose is not to serve yourself, but to serve others, but to ensure that you are being able to bring out the best of yourself, right? And the best part about being the best of yourself is the best version of you today isn't going to be the best version of you tomorrow, right? Because you've just learned things through that day, or, and maybe not on a daily basis, but weekly, monthly, it compounds, it snowballs. And who you were, 5 years ago, you probably thought, okay, I'm really good at this. This is great. Or you might not. You might have thought you're really, really crap. But now when you're looking at yourself, you're thinking, oh, I'm really, really good. And there's probably areas where you think you're not really good at, right? 5 years from now, 2 years from now, whenever it is, you're going to look back and think, oh, remember when I used to think this? And, it's hindsight, but until you go through that process or progress, it's hard to even fathom or understand it. It's like with your running, right? You know, it's kind of like, I know you've been dabbling in how you've been trying to build that out. And it's hard work, but it's daily, and the consistency then compounds. And then, you know, whether it's 30 days in, all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is actually a lot easier than 30 days ago. And now my best version of myself is being able to do this a lot easier. It's not about you're
Yeah.
the best person in the world. It's the best version of yourself. It's yeah, well, it's very interesting how all this kind of plays across each other. It's very deep. I do apologize to anyone that came into this
No.
thinking it's going to be a light-hearted conversation, and we're like, we're really into it.
Yeah, you know, this is like my wheelhouse. I love this. At the beginning of the podcast, you said something about university, and I didn't go to university until I was 24, 25.
Okay.
And I would recommend everyone does that. I would not recommend living the way that I did from 18 to 23, 24. Yeah. But I went to school. I was doing philosophy. I wanted to be a professor. And then, right, I don't think I was a drug addict, but I definitely did not say no to drugs. And oh man, what a wonderful experience in a lot of regards. Also, a lot of terrible things. And fortunately, for my my son's mother, she did not want to stop partying whenever it came time to have a kid and do all this. And she found herself incarcerated.
Okay.
And I was 24, going to school, working a full-time job, and had a baby on my own. And then I was going through a legal battle that ended up resulting in me winning custody of him and moving to Indiana. So a lot of my purpose, honestly, it's kind of hard to get how bad I was at that for a while, being a dad up here. Like I just kind of like skated by. But philosophy was like definitely like a huge interest of mine, and always has been. And having these kind of conversations that could go on forever, it's always been a favorite thing of mine. But it's hard to distill and figure out what the value is, in my opinion, because I don't articulate this in a way that I would like to on my YouTube channel. Maybe that, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know I would counter that and say, well, you know, I receive from your YouTube channel differently to how you would, because you're creating it, right? So always, it's like when you cook something, it doesn't taste good, but when someone else cooks exactly the same thing, it's like, oh, this is heaven, right? So it's because
I think my food tastes great, by the way.
Okay, well, but so maybe it could also be a confidence thing, and I think a lot of the time it is, right? But it's interesting that you said you wanted to be a professor and, you know, philosophical or philosophy, and it's very ironic because that's, you know, you're the perfect match for that, you know, from these conversations, from the content that you create. And what's interesting though is literally what you just said about your YouTube. And for anyone that's listening, if you haven't checked out Jon's YouTube, go jump over there. There's lots of great conversations and insights about the world and life and just everything, kind of like we're chatting on today. But I think it's very interesting because you said you wanted to be, you know, a professor, but the stuff you talk about on a day-to-day basis on your channel, or, you know, whether it's in your blog and all the different mediums that you're doing, is kind of like, in some sense, the tip of the iceberg of what you would be talking about if you were a professor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like, I think about that a lot. You and I we were talking about our parents, and we both, you know, we're good children, so we made sure to say we forgive them, we don't blame them, and all that. But you're talking about your Pokemon cards. I was talking about like creating. My parents knew that film school existed, and thank God they didn't waste $50,000 on that. Like I just would have squandered that anyway. And it's also bullshit. Like I attended film school classes for free. I'd go with my friends that I was selling weed to when I was 21 and learning stuff in class. But the point is, like you just said, well, I'm kind of like doing like philosophy stuff, like 100 level community college shit, right? But the internet facilitates that ability. I think for a creative, curious person, it may be hard to like hone in what that is. And I think if you just make stuff and put your back against the wall and you keep working, you'll like naturally define who you are. Yeah. Which has kind of been my approach. But with your Pokemon cards and like eBay being a thing, it's like that wasn't even a thing. Like, well, no one knew to tell us to do that 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, that's very true. And I think it's a great parallel around, you know, hindsight is one of those things, is because you mentioned that, you know, you would encourage people not to go straight into university, right? But you only know that now, right? You would,
Right.
you going into university, you wouldn't have said, oh yeah, you shouldn't go into university when you start. That was your decision, what you did. Everyone's journey is different. Whereas I went straight into university only because I was motivated, I was driven, and I'm like, just come out of high school, I just want to get in there and get it done. And there's nothing wrong with this mentality, but you are hyped up, to go get the job, to do the 9 to 5, make some money, get a house, get married, all that jazz, right? Which is fine, 100% fine. But at the same time, now that I reflect back on it, I'm thinking, I remember sitting down with, you have like a career counselor while you're going through high school before going into university. And we had to pick out our top 10 or top 12 subjects or courses that we were going to study at university. Because if you didn't get your first preference, naturally you would then get, additional offers. So they wanted me to put up to 10 to 12 of these in case I didn't get my fifth one, then maybe I'll get an offer from my eighth one. And I'm thinking, hang on a second, like, yeah, the first two preferences were probably the two courses that I really wanted to do, Bachelor of IT, and I think it was, something else, information technology. And then there was all these other ones. I'm thinking these have got nothing to do with what I want to do, but they're kind of like pathways to get me there. And it just felt so forced, right? And obviously back then I don't know what I know now, so to me that's normal. But I look back at it and I'm like, where was the people saying, by the way, you go create a YouTube channel, and if you wanted to just do Pokemon cards or flip on eBay, or even if you wanted to just do comedy on YouTube or have a YouTube channel about finance, I'm just using YouTube as an example, that didn't exist. But the same thing, they didn't have that perspective mindset either. So it's not really their fault either. But it kind of comes back to the first thing when we first started, having this conversation, is that, we are having all this influence from people before us, and they can't tell us what they don't know. So in order for us to find purpose, in order for us to discover, we have to go out and experience, learn, and understand. But at the same time, I think we're living in a world where this opportunity, like this conversation, if I had the ability to listen to this conversation when I was at an age where I'm thinking, do I go to university? Do I go pursue my passion? Do I go, explore more or follow the curiosity? Well, then maybe I would have, right? And I think that's the power of the ability of someone like yourself sharing all the insights that you do, or, your conversations or your blogs that you are posting, because I think they do bring together exactly that, kind of doing life, sharing life, the insights of just, whether it's chasing passion, goals, purpose, happiness and all that. But at the same time, you're also challenging the norm and, the worldview of different things. And I think those little bites are really, really handy, because if someone actually spends the, 30 seconds or 5 minutes to watch or read, they'll actually probably realize, like, okay, there's actually some interesting things here. And I think that already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't. I started thinking about, if you would have tried to explain to me, like, senior year of high school, that I'd be chatting with someone in Australia about content I'd make, I would just immediately think, oh, I made it as a famous director.
Yeah.
Like, because this conversation is necessarily, it wasn't simple to find each other, but it was rather simple to set up.
Yeah.
And even if you're like as awake as you could possibly be to talk to a high school student or someone trying to find their purpose, you can't predict what's going to happen in the world. It's ever changing. And I think being comfortable with change is like a really hard thing to do. But once you can start getting comfortable with change and accepting that curiosity, or embracing curiosity and accepting change.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a world of opportunity that can open up in front of you. And instead of like being overwhelmed by it, if you start to like practicing, how wonderful is this? How wonderful are all these opportunities?
Yeah. It's a very good point, and obviously it's very relevant to everything that's happening in the world right now, just with COVID and just the chaos and everything. And it's I don't know how to answer this, because I actually don't know at what point it was that defining moment where I have taken a more positive look on things, or I try to look at, well, what can we take from this? How can we take control, right? And I think it has been obviously because of COVID, having to have that inner reflectiveness and take a journey of self-awareness of realizing, what am I doing with my life? Not that there was anything wrong with it. It was just knowing that in the back of my mind, I had dreams, goals, things that I wanted to pursue or curious about. And if I didn't make a change myself, then nothing else was going to make it happen. Because sometimes we think in our back of our heads, oh, if I lose my job, then I can start this, or if this happens, then I'll do that. But they're all things which probably aren't actually going to be good things to happen. And they might not actually mean that I would then go start the things that I'm thinking about. So I guess in that moment, it's kind of like, well, what can you control and what can you do about it? But I think, how do you teach someone to understand that it's easy to just take control of what you can control and then things will work out? Because it's not easy, but if you actually do it, it makes things easier. So it's a really big tricky situation, because I mean, how do you, when things are going so bad and you tell people, it's like, well, what can you, and I've been saying this to a lot of people, it's like, well, what can you focus your attention on? What can you control? And that's what you should be focusing on. And, it's very overwhelming to just say that, expecting people can just take it and run with it.
Right. That's very stoic of you, by the way, focusing on like what you can control and like letting go of the rest.
Yeah, and I'm
It's
not saying
also the
it's
sanity
easy.
prayer for
Yeah,
everyone.
but
No,
it
it's not.
but it's something which, I've learned in the last year so much. Is like, well, especially here in Australia, I'm in lockdown at the moment, so we've been extended. We have curfews that you're not allowed to leave your house from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. You have to have a work permit to go out. It's crazy stuff, right? Now, it doesn't really impact me as such, right? Because I'm doing this for myself, but it's overwhelming just from the mental aspects of what it does to people and seeing it, what it does to other people. So for me to say to someone else, is like, well, what can you control? And they've just, maybe they've lost their job or their business has gone under, and for me to say, well, how can you pivot out of this, right? It's, who am I to say that, right? But at the same
Right.
time, I think there's always opportunities, and it comes down to willpower in some sense. And obviously people can lose their willpower from just being broken over and over again. But it's something which I'm not expecting you to have the answer for it either, but it's definitely something which I think we all have to go through that experience once again. And then you come out and realize, okay, if I had made this decision, if I had spent the time doing this, then maybe we might have had a different result. It's kind of like, when you do something naughty and your parents ground you, right? And then the next time, not to do that, because then you won't be grounded. So the only way maybe to learn that, if I just focus on something that I can control and not put the energy on things that you can't, well, then you will actually progress.
Yeah, it's like, how do you do 100 push-ups if you've never done push-ups? You can't just do them all at once. You can try. Like, I made a video about this where
Yeah.
I had to be like super honest about how little physical like body resistant like activity I've been doing, and I wanted to do 100 push-ups a day, and I did like 40 to 60 in one day, and then I couldn't do push-ups for a week.
Yeah.
So like, same with your brain. You have to like start like small. Like, if you have a moment and you're starting to freak out, take a second, take a deep breath, right?
Yeah.
And with content, I think of myself, with what I'm doing and what I want to do is like, I want to be a piece to someone's puzzle to figuring out their brain. Because
Yep.
for me, when I quit my job, when my fiance started making enough, she made as much money as we were both making working, and my job was causing a lot of stress and trust issues between us. So it didn't make sense for me to go to work.
Yep.
And I stopped for a while, and I probably played too many video games. I started trying to edit videos, and it was bad. And all the skills I had didn't make sense with my life. I felt like I had no skills, which was partially true. Um, and the thing that, and I went to a dark place. I hate to even say it, but like, I thought about killing myself literally like every day for like probably 6 months.
Wow.
And what got me out of that, and what kind of started my motivation to start making these like self-helpy, like infotainment kind of videos on YouTube, was everyone like from Gary Vee to like smaller channels and people like you, Chris, and like all these people creating. Like, I started following a guy named Cody Warner, started
Okay.
watching
Yep.
him
Yep.
vlog every day, right? it wasn't just one person. It was me being desperate and just hearing enough people that I
Yeah.
viewed as successful, because they were further down the road than I was at. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't, I was still editing in like a program called Wondershare Filmora, which is basically like an editor on your iPhone. These
Yeah.
people were miles ahead of me, but they all kept sharing obvious truths,
Yeah.
which to me, honestly, at the time were not obvious.
Yeah.
So other than saying the cliche, like just keep going, right? But you can't define someone else's rock bottom. You can't define
Correct.
someone else's purpose. But if you're struggling and you're having a hard time and you're listening to this, just keep learning, and eventually it's going to click. Okay, all
Yeah.
of these people are saying this, and then after a while, your brain is going to be able to do the equivalent of 100 push-ups.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like I've had, unfortunately, a lot of crazy things happen in my life. Some were not any fault of mine. A lot of them were probably faults of
Yeah.
mine. But like when the ceiling of my the house collapsed here
Yeah.
like 6 months ago, like I realized I was like, I thrive in situations like that because I can now like identify what an emergency is, and I know what really matters to me.
Yeah.
And as long as that's good, I feel like that was kind of all over the place, but it does, like you said, there isn't an answer. It just for
Yeah.
me personally, it took continually hearing enough people say the same shit, like
Yeah.
don't cry about things you can't control and focus on what you can and go from there. And then like that knowledge just builds.
Yeah. I mean, you would think, if there's a lot of people saying the same thing, it's not like it's some big conspiracy or hoax, right? Like, I mean, it really does come down to that success does leave clues, and there is a consistent message being shared. Now, at the same time, if anyone has watched any of these creators, there's we can talk about the cliche of Casey Neistat, right? We all started at zero, right? But I've followed so many different people while doing my own YouTube and seeing them grow, right? And a lot of the greats or the OGs of YouTube, they've been on it for 10 to 15 years. And you think about, well, if I had started 10 to 15 years ago, where would have I been? Not necessarily on YouTube, but anything, right? And I think that's the other thing which we tend to do ourselves not as a favor is we jump into whether it is Instagram, YouTube, and all of a sudden we see all these people doing things, but it's they're further along a timeline, and we can become so overwhelmed with thinking, well, that's where I want to be, but I can't even fathom of how to get there, right? But I think you saying about the push-ups, breaking it down to something as small as that, because I think people could probably, with the right adrenaline, maybe smash out 100 push-ups if they wanted to, but could they smash out 100 push-ups per day? No way, right? Because they're just going to get exhausted, they're just going to get tired. But I think if people actually take the small bites and say, okay, I'm going to do one push-up today, I'm going to do one and a bit more tomorrow, I'm going to do 3, 4, and see it grow, all of a sudden their mind starts to realize that, okay, this is easier. It's the same with running. It's the same with all those different things in building habits. It's time on feet, it's consistency, it's habit building, which you mentioned at the start, which actually you said about, finding purpose is sometimes all about just building the habit to find purpose, right? Because if you're not doing anything to move forward, then you won't, right? And that's the habit might be just doing what is one thing that I can do today that's going to get me closer to whatever it is, that purpose, that run, that thing that I'm interested in. Because if you're not, then you can't expect to be, where those greats are or where those people are. But I'm very curious to hear your perspective on this. So when we talk about, I guess the, cliche of highlight reels and things that we see on Instagram and YouTube and whatnot, and you kind of already touched on it, that you are seeing a lot of people saying, you need to get out, do more, Gary V, and all that jazz. But do you find that you struggle seeing those things, or does it outweigh, the positive things that you're taking away from it? Or how do you feel like, that whole do more attitude, everyone telling you we need to hustle, we need to get all these things happening, do you think that's kind of causing a bit of an issue, whether it's for you or for a broader population? Or do you think it's actually probably benefiting, and I know you've already mentioned that it has helped you, to actually take action and to stick to our journey and make it happen? Because It's in everyone's face, every teenager's face. You're getting obviously lots of random stuff, but then you do have all this stuff coming from a lot of the big guns sharing the message of like, you need to hustle, you need to do this. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on where you are and who you are when you hear those messages. My son started cross country a year ago, 2 years ago, and practice got canceled one day because of rain. And I made him go out and run in the rain with me. And I remember thinking my family were like, that's a dick parent move. That's like an aggro dad move. But we were running, and I was like, you know what everyone else is doing right now? They're sitting around because practice was canceled, and you're out here working.
Yeah.
And he got knocked down in the next race he was in, like at the start line. And in 5th and 6th grade cross country, they don't restart the race if people topple over. So he got trampled. And in the prior 2 meets, he'd come in 3rd and like 5th or something like that. So I'm up at the first turn and I see like 30 kids come by.
Yep.
And he's not there. And then he looks at me, and I didn't realize at this point he'd fallen over. But I was like, remember that work? He's like, do you want to win? And he like shook his head, and I was like, well, then go for it. And he's just like kicked into gear.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you want to do and where you want to be when you hear that message. Like you can maybe think that you're not doing anything because you've done nothing but watch Instagram for 7 hours, and you keep hearing people talk about hustle, and you're like, well, I haven't hustled at all, you know?
Yeah. No, so, it's a very good perspective because you're very, once again, it comes back to experience and how we can take that information in. And I think that's why, one of the real reasons why I wanted to start the podcast was we get so focused on hearing and seeing these people that, are doing the big dollars, or they found their purpose, or they found success, whatever that is, they've defined it as. And we think, how did they do it? And they said, oh, it was, 10 years of hard work. And you're like, okay, yeah, we know that, but like, what did you actually do? Right. It's where's where's the answers, where's the stepping stones? And I think hearing, conversations like this, or, other people that are just starting out, and even me doing my own journey on my, on my own channel, I want to be able to show people that it doesn't happen overnight. Some people, they win the lottery, they get $1 million, but on the contrary, to actually grow and build a business and make $1 million, it's a lot of hard work. And some people do, they hit the nail on the head and they hit the trend and it takes off, and not everyone will get that. That's probably just as similar as winning the lottery, but there is hundreds, thousands of people that have been successful, if we're defining, $1 million as successful, that have done that, and they've done it with their own blood, sweat and tears, by showing up, putting in the reps every day, doing the push-ups kind of thing, right? And I think maybe if that content was actually delivered to the audience at the right time, then they would be able to execute and take action. But at the moment, it's just on, it's on repeat. It's just on a spinning wheel. You can just scroll. So it kind of just becomes a bit of a blur, unless someone's wide thinking, oh, I actually want to take action. How can I learn? And I think it's very interesting to see how this is going to, change our society, or in 5-10 years, because there's going to be a mindset of people which have heard all this before, but then at the same time, they all have this expectation that they can get all these things if they just show up, but maybe missing the hard work part of things.
Yeah. I was listening to a marketing podcast yesterday, and this guy was just talking about how similar thing to you, which is what made me think about it. But he was talking about all these entrepreneurs that put in all this work, and when they find success, they tell you about all the different pieces they made fit together. But anyone that's in business that long enough, like statistically, for your business to even generate any income, like if it's generating any income, that is a huge success. That is
exactly
so hard to do. 1 out of every 10 major businesses in America go under every year, right?
Yeah.
Even more than that, like 90% of startups don't like get into the black. People downplay luck.
Yeah.
Luck is a huge part of it. And what they say, luck is when opportunity meets like hard work, right?
Yeah.
And that's such a hard thing to keep in mind. And also, with hustle culture, and you're hearing all these entrepreneurs talking about just going for it. Honestly, I don't think that everyone should do it, because who wants to stay up at night, like worrying if like they're converting or they're in the black, or if anyone's going to call or whatever. Like I'm in a phase right now of my life where I've spent 8 weeks waiting for 3 paychecks. Like if
Yep.
I didn't have a Lexus, I would have had to put like all my bills on credit.
Yep.
I had the money coming in.
Yep.
It's a decent chunk of change, but like I accidentally put the wrong address on an invoice, and
Yep.
then the guy who owns the company that I'm working for went on a motorcycle journey for 3 weeks. I'm like, oh my God. And they're like a huge client. They're like the biggest client I've ever gotten. So like I couldn't contact him. And then a L'Oreal, like this like skincare company, like smaller check, but I spent, I don't know, probably 30 hours trying to get paid $500 from these people because none of the processing stuff is working.
Yeah.
Like, that's a nightmare. No one talks about that when they talk about sponsorships or they talk about like being a filmmaker and all this stuff. Like it is a lot. And
I
there
think,
is luck in it too.
Yeah, and that's right. That's the reality of it. And I think, playing back onto the luck part is that's opportunity, right? Yes, people are lucky, but they're only lucky because they were putting themselves in a position where the opportunity came up so that they could say yes, or that they were there at the right time. Now, people say, oh, you were at the right place at the right time, or you were served a silver platter. Yeah, if you were born into it, I wouldn't say it's lucky. That's just what you're born into, right? It's just the way life is. But that doesn't mean that they're any better than anyone else, because there's plenty of people, born in with more stuff. It doesn't mean they're any more successful than anyone, because the good thing is we get to define our own success, which, and I know that can be hard to swallow from some people, but, coming back to you, even putting in the reps daily and doing the push-ups, you doing that and sharing that journey opens up opportunities of people seeing it, getting motivated. You grow a trend, more people are jumping on, people are following a hashtag. All of a sudden, you've got a big TikTok following, right? And all of a sudden, that doesn't mean you're lucky. You were just doing, sharing, and you were putting it out there. So therefore, it took off because that opportunity was out there. You weren't, you might have been lucky, but it was more so because you were intentful. You were putting it out with the intent to just share and grow. And it took off, right? Because you've inspired someone. Someone saw it when they needed to see it, so they shared it, and continues to grow, right? And I think that's why it is so important to continue showing up and, moving forwards, as we've kind of been talking about this whole conversation of like pivoting, adjusting, finding ways to progress. And once again, we're pursuing your purpose and, bringing value or giving to other people's, because if you're doing that, then you're probably always going to be moving forward, right? Because it's either going to be you spending your money, it's either going to be you helping them with action, or you're creating something which is going to then inspire someone else later. So it all really comes down to, the effort you put in is the result you're going to get potentially.
Right. And I'm working on this piece, and it's like how my collaboration with Matt Diavella changed my life.
Oh yeah.
Spoiler alert, it did not change my life, and I didn't collab with him. But what did happen is I tweeted about his newsletter, and he screenshot my review of his newsletter and put it into the beginning of his video, which made me fanboy real hard to see my face and my logo on his screen. But I thought, man, if anyone searches the name on that review, I put in enough work that they can get sucked into my ecosystem. Because my views are like, you could argue my channel's dead at this point, like very, very few views. But what does happen is occasionally I'll get a spike in views, and it's from like a couple people or one person. They will see something of mine and then they'll get sucked up into that. So it's a matter of time, I guess, before I get lucky, right? I could never get lucky and get something picked up into a trending or whatever. But what is true is that there are people there who are seeing it and they're sticking around for whatever reason, right? Hopefully it's a reason that I've determined, because that means I'm like fairly competent. So I think saying the luck thing is divisive, because it could, it could be counterintuitive. It could make someone not be motivated to put in the work, but you definitely have to put in the effort. You have to put in more effort than you probably would for someone else, right? Like if you work for a boss or you work for an owner of a business, they care about that business way more than you can ever even begin to imagine, right? The same thing if you start down on a creative path, like you're gonna have that passion. You're gonna, you like you said, you have to define success for yourself. So for me, success would be like if I can make a full-time living making videos, even if that means like I peak out at like 400 subscribers ever, you know?
No.
Then the rest is, luck and work, right? All that stuff.
Oh, I know we could chat about this for ages. So I want to dive in and touch on, and you've been alluding and you've mentioned so many different areas that I want to jump into next, which is, about yourself. You're a dad, you are a business owner, and you are someone kind of just figuring things out as you go, right? Learning and adjusting. And I want to hear a bit about, working for yourself, because you are doing, it's interesting because, you do have a business, but you're doing a YouTube, you're blogging, you've got a podcast, you're doing so many different things. So when we talk about working for yourself, if someone was to ask you, oh, what do you do for a living? What do you do and how is it going?
I have a media business. I spend the majority of my time filming branding videos for businesses, small to medium businesses, anywhere from like 1 to 100 employees.
Okay.
And generally where I start is solo filmmaking, because there can be professional quality there. And it's also budget friendly.
Okay. And then the podcast and your other, I guess, side gigs or YouTube hustles, whatever we want to call them, those on the side. So how do they play into you working for yourself, or are they actually just hobbies and things which are maybe dreams, ideas of things that you want to take off in the long run? Or are you putting them more there hoping that kind of like investments in some sense? Or how do they weigh up against your business?
A couple of things. I view YouTube as a business, and it is like the biggest thing that weighs on my mind right now. I'm like constantly trying to solve that puzzle. I'm like, what can I do? Because clearly it's not working. And then I have to remind myself, I am talking to you because of YouTube. Maybe I can refine my process, but what's fucked about it is if I log into YouTube after this conversation and I saw that a video gone viral, I would think that I was doing something right.
Yeah.
And I understand that's like part of metrics and vanity metrics and all that, but that's the name of the game, right?
Yeah.
So
that's the luck of you showing up all the time.
Right, exactly. But what has influenced my real life business is I have in my demo reel, there are some of the skits that I filmed with my son, because they're fairly complicated.
Oh, yep.
Life is good. If you didn't know my son, you would think he was an actor that I'd worked with, right? So I've got content for my demo reel. So I've been able to develop spec pieces and then also make like self-help content.
Yeah.
And then also I've had people that follow me that I will reach out to in real life that are in my local market, and they see me continually putting things out.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a phase of life where I'm putting out like high quality, like reels, and I'm like doing talking head pieces, I've had people that are potential clients or warm leads reach out to me like, we should do something together.
Yeah. It's like kind of putting your skin in the game and showing what's the possibilities and things like that. So look, I mean, once again, I'm more just curious, because hearing people that are doing a YouTube or having a podcast or doing a blog or whatever, it's always curious to understand their take on it, because some people say, oh, I'm not serious about that, I'm just doing it. And what annoys me so much is when people say, oh, I'm not serious about it. And then these are the people that have like, 5, 10, 20,000 subscribers. And you think, hang on, you're not serious about this, but you're obviously doing something right. And on the contrary, I've seen people that have, gone in with the intent of just to do something small and then blown up, right? And, become, 100,000 subscribers literally within a week, overnight kind of thing. And then they've looked at it thinking, well, hang on, I didn't want this, right? Or I didn't realize I didn't want this. And I think seeing those two different worlds and then hearing yours as well is, it's kind of beautiful, because I think what you're creating, which is why we're originally having this conversation in the first place, is worth sharing more, right? Because otherwise I wouldn't be having you on the podcast, because I think what you share, what you create, what you do, there's some truth there. There's some really good, valid conversation that I think of value that people need to hear and understand. And I haven't watched all your content, but I've watched enough to think, well, this is the type of person that I think can encourage, influence, inspire other people, right? And I think, when we look at our own stuff, we tend to obviously play, really hard on ourselves because, that's normal, right? And I think, it's interesting. We've talked about so much around, making sure that we do continue to push on, and you're continuing to push on, and you've spoken about how you see your YouTube as a business because it's the thing that's always on your mind. And I want to actually just clarify with you. So would you find doing your business easier than doing your YouTube?
Man, yeah, the goals are more clearly defined. With
Yeah.
my business, I thought no one's ever going to pay me to use my camera.
Yeah.
And then someone did. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. Right.
Yeah.
And I still struggle with business a little bit because my end like purpose is to be able to give Alexis the freedom that I feel like I have.
Yeah.
Like she may not want to quit her job, but just for me to say, hey, you can quit your job today if you want, and
Yeah.
to be able to financially provide that for her. Yeah, business is a little bit more defined. I'm able to figure out like different ways to approach the market. And like I said, with like YouTube, like right now, like I could have a video that's becoming massively consumed
Yeah.
by an audience, and then that would mean that that was a success.
Yeah.
I don't think I would divert too much from what I was doing because I resonate with what I'm making now. The danger of what I just said too is like I had a blog post about this where I said going accidentally viral almost ruined my life.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
had a video, yeah, I had like a prank style video where I was like trying to kiss my homophobic grandpa, and he like was like smacking me in my head.
Yep.
If I would have been paying attention to YouTube, that's what I would have done. I would have become that person.
Yeah.
So whenever you go into business, this is very important. And whenever you go into YouTube too, you have to be like aware of like what you are creating, because you don't want to create a prison cell for yourself, right?
Yeah. It's very true. It really comes back to the conversation we've had in this entire episode, which is that purpose, right? And understanding what's the intent, the purpose, the focus of that YouTube, of the business, of whatever you're creating. And I think anyone that's listening it's exactly that, right? I mean, purpose will evolve and change and grow over time, but sometimes, for me, when I started my YouTube channel, it was as simple as like, well, I've got a camera, I enjoy running, I feel like other people might find value from this or enjoy it or want to see how I, learned how to run a 5K or a 10K. Now, then when you create it, you think, oh my gosh, this is horrible, right? But then, 5-6 years later, here we are. And, I have created that content. I've pivoted. I'm now doing a lot more than just running. And I look back and think I could never have fathomed this now, but it's something that I always wanted, right? And it's just weird to be able to reflect on that. And I think if people just continue to understand, well, what's your North Star? Where do you want to be going? And keep moving in that direction. Not saying you have to be hustling, but you're moving in that direction. Well, then when you get there, you're going to be satisfied. I'm not saying it's going to be easy and you're going to be happy along the way, but you'll get there and be satisfied. Because if you get so wrapped up on just the vanity metrics and things like, oh, I need to have 1,000 subscribers, you're going to get there and you think, crap, now what? Right. And because at the end of the day, that shouldn't be your purpose. Your purpose shouldn't be about to get 1,000 subscribers or a number or whatever. It should be about, well, what do you actually want to create? What are you defining the purpose of the YouTube channel? And I think that would, I'm just using YouTube as an example, but business, anything you're creating. And it's a good parallel to life, right? Because if we don't kind of set what are we trying to achieve, and you summed it up so well there. You said that you want to be able to give Alexis, the ability to say, if you wanted to quit, you can, right? And at the start of this episode, you kind of said that, your focus is that, you wanted to be able to just, be the dad, be there for your family. And, that's your priority, right? And that is obviously very evident because you literally just come full circle and defines, well, whether it's YouTube, the business, or your mediums, that's where you're trying to create them to enable you to have is that financial freedom or lifestyle to be able to spend with your loved ones.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Man.
It's good.
Thanks, man. Before I started making content online, I wanted to like inspire a bunch of people because I'd like got out of the hole I was in, started running. I couldn't even make it around the block. And where I started, and I think there could be value to anyone listening to this, is I had the self-awareness to know that I didn't have a massive audience, but I was like, I'm going to pick 3 people to like try to come on a journey with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my friend who was much fatter than I was. I love him, Nate. We did comedy together. It's okay that I just called him a fatty. But he started running, and after like the 30 days, and I ran almost a mile together. There was a chef person that I was doing something with. Oh, they would post on Instagram every day what they were eating.
Right.
And I was like, if I can't figure out how to inspire and motivate 3 people, that's fine. That doesn't mean I suck forever, but I have to figure out how to encourage at least a small group around me if I'm going to encourage a larger group.
Yeah. That's a really good exercise, actually, because a lot of the time, I mean, we probably grow into it, but to be out, it's kind of like doing a little prototype and just getting that real-time feedback real quickly, because you're going to learn really quickly, right? And I think that's a great way to approach it, because a lot of the time we do sometimes get stuck with, when we do create and we go to our loved ones, they're going to give you, oh yeah, this is great, but sometimes that's not the feedback you need. You need to be able to make it a little tougher and think, well, go a little broader. And that's actually really, really good advice. I think anyone, if you're trying to get into something, is do exactly what Jon has done there, because it's a nice little exercise to be able to test the flavor, or flavor is probably not the right word, but test the value of something that you're doing, rather than waiting 2 years to see if that value even exists. So really good advice. And you can probably apply it to so many different things.
For sure. And I wanted to say, when you asked about YouTube and business, which is harder, business does feel personal, but you're able to detach from it in some ways, especially if your business is like my business is blended for media. But YouTube feels so personal.
Yeah.
It's like if a video doesn't do well, it's like, I didn't do well.
No, it's a good point. It's just interesting, because the way you talk about it, and I know this isn't true, but the way you talk that your business is something you don't have to worry about, something that's a bit more smooth sailing. But the YouTube, it's kind of like you grind at it, but you don't get the result that you want. Therefore, it's like it's the big mess that you're trying to figure out, right? And but a lot of the time they're actually probably exactly the same thing. Maybe just because you're in a more of a groove or further along the timeline in the business, you're just more confident with it, or you're just like, well, I've been paid, so it clearly is working. Whereas on YouTube, you haven't necessarily got the result of whatever it is you're looking for, to help you then click and think, oh my gosh, I'm making a difference, or I'm having purpose here, or whatever it is. But that's okay as well, because you continue to move forward and you're adapting and adjusting and trying and learning, and eventually something will stick, right? It's kind of like, painters, they throw things together and then they sell it for millions of dollars all of a sudden. And it's like, well, why did you make this? And it's kind of like, well, this one I liked the most. It's like,
yeah. I made myself work for 8 hours. And this is what happened.
Exactly.
No, you are right. Like, especially doing like the majority of what I do solo. If I ever work with a team of people, they are subcontractors. So I don't have like employees on payroll. But just cognitively, I'm able to be like, this is a business move I have to make, or I don't have potential people coming in the door, so I need to do sales for my business. Does it still feel bad? Yeah. Mike Birbiglia, comic, talked about the difference between being a songwriter, bombing on stage, and a comic. And he's like, if you're a songwriter, you're playing the guitar, you're singing the song, and the crowd is like, they start booing or they're quiet. They don't like the song. But if you're a comic and you're up there and you're bombing, they're like, we don't like you. And Alexis called me a masochist the other night. She's like, I figured you out. You're a masochist, because I like doing things where it's that personal. And I think YouTube is harder than business. One, you are, I'm not saying you're wrong, because you're so right about the confidence and everything else. And I am so vastly aware that if something got picked up by an algorithm, I would stupidly, arrogantly, I would have let my ego for a little bit do some driving and be like, you did it. You figured it out, even though I didn't, right?
And you got to enjoy the little wins.
Yeah, but it does. To me, it feels, because it is my name. Even Awoken Dudes, if that crashes and burns, I do give a fuck, but I give way less of a fuck, because it is the brand that I'm building. and there's like a business plan behind it, and
Yeah.
it's much more in the physical world because I'm doing like a men's group, and we're like having our first meetup this Sunday and all
Oh,
that.
nice.
There's a strategy there, right?
Yeah.
But with just me, it's my name, it's me, my avatar
Yeah.
doing this. I'm like, do I need to change that? Do I look pop? Like all it's.
Yeah.
I think it will
yeah.
be more rewarding in the long run, but it's
Yeah.
so much more personal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I know we could talk on hours for this, because I think that the thing that separates the difference is, you said it right. It's personal, and if it's your brand, if it's you, you shouldn't necessarily have to strategize you. Now, there might be a business lens that you can apply to it of yourself, and how can you reach out to more people. But at the end of the day, when it comes to personal branding, you don't want to be forcing yourself to be upon other people. The idea is that you want yourself to attract the people, right? And the people will come for themselves. Because otherwise you're going to, like, if you're thinking about how can I build my sales of my own personal brand, it's kind of like, you feel dirty if you're going out trying to sell yourself to someone else and then thinking, oh, okay, I guess he's good enough, I'll go follow him. Whereas at the end of the day, you want to be continuing to do what you're doing. You're not necessarily getting huge people showing up, but you're getting people showing up that are like, I love this guy. Anything that he does, I'm going to stand by it, right? And there's some really good, resources out there. There's the whole theory of a thousand true fans. And Pat Flynn has a book called Super Fans as well, which talks about this. If you have 1,000 people that follow you and are loyal to you, that's going to be better than having 10,000 people or 100,000 people, because you could put something out there, they won't touch it. You put it out to 1,000 loyal followers and they're going to buy it, well, then it's all good, right? And I'm not saying it's all about the money, but the intent is sometimes less is more in this perspective. And I think you doing what you're doing and keeping it real in terms of your personal brand, it's just a matter of time that more people get aware of what you're doing, right? And I know that because in the last 6 months, I've seen so many more things come to life as I've continued to grow myself, which has expanded into my own personal brand of me discovering, self-aware, trying new things. I'm experiencing new things, even just sharing more to people, reaching out and starting a podcast, right? You learn so much more, you get more opportunity, and more people are coming aware of you. So there's more people inclined to, want to come along for that journey. So I think it is just a matter of time, because there is nothing wrong with your content. I know that for sure. I'm really keen to jump into what I love to call is rapid fire questions. And the idea is to just go through some short and sweet different points. You can answer them short and sweet if possible, but if there's some points of value you want to add, by all means, please, let's do that. And the first one, which is usually the first question I ask everyone, is favorite book you have read?
Slaughterhouse-Five.
Okay, that was really quick. That was good.
Yeah.
I have not read it. I have no context of it. I'm going to look it up afterwards. But for the audience, that's his favorite book, and I'll put that in the description and in the show notes as well.
Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut.
Awesome, thank you. 3 lessons or tips you would share to yourself as a teenager?
Learn to breathe. Document any kind of progress, because even like in a macro setting, like doing 100 push-ups, you see success there. And what you eat is definitely vastly underrated. There is power in plants.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's some really good advice, and a whole broad range of things there. Really appreciate that. And three hobbies you love to do.
Video games, more specifically Rocket League.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Blogging. And that's running, right? Yeah, running.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Once again, good variety of different things, very healthy there. And then 10 years from now, this could be this might open a can of worms. 10 years from now, what do you think the world looks like?
It's going to be probably maybe warmer because of like what we've done to the planet, but once everything collapses and we go back to tribal times, it's going to be the same way it's been for thousands of years. very few people are going to realize that the power that they have is within them. And those people are going to try to be teaching the masses that the power that they have, the power that they need is like all within inside of themselves.
Yeah. That's a really good perspective. No, that's good. And I'm going to leave it there because otherwise we'll get stuck talking
Rapid
about
fire.
it.
Rapid fire.
If you could have coffee with anyone from the entirety of history, who would it be and why?
You.
Okay. I'll take that. And why? Why? I have to know why.
Because you're so handsome. Damn it. No. I don't give a fuck who it is. Like I want it to be you. I'm talking to you. I want to meet you in real life. And man, that's people are vastly overrated. Like one person can't get shit done. It takes an entire community of people around that person, no matter who they are.
It's a good answer.
Everyone has their flaws.
I liked both the answers to that question. That's good. Three sources of inspiration that you have or that you go to.
Hafiz.
So what was it?
He's a Hafiz.
Okay. Yep.
He's a poet, right? A Sufi poet. Charles Bukowski, another poet, scumbag, outlaw, anti-beat, and then my family.
Okay. Yep, that's good.
I should have said Alexis and then my kids is two of those, but I was like, oh shit, Alexis is the biggest one, but then the kids are Alexis and the kids are tied.
Yeah, she knows it. She knows it.
She's not gonna listen to this. I would be surprised if she did.
I'm gonna wait.
I'm just joking.
I'm gonna wait till that one day that she does, and I'm gonna see some video of you saying, "Oh, she finally watched the video."
Yeah.
The last one for you then is you win $10,000. What do you do with it?
Oh my gosh. Paying off credit card debt. Yeah. I keep my business finances separate from everything else in the family, and I'm doing well now. My business is in the black. I don't know how you do that necessarily, but I have, it's just like $3,000 in credit card debt from 2020, kind of like. All of my clients at the beginning of 2020 were me filming in offices.
Okay.
If that gives you any kind of perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, man, I would probably go and make a better documentary for Neil. I have not finished the one I've started almost a year ago now because it's not as good as I want it to be. And I can't justify going to do more time on it.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's a very honest answer. That's what I love about, when we do have these conversations and content is you do speak truth. So I appreciate that. It's a real answer, right? Not saying that anyone else's answer isn't real, but like it's a down to earth kind of conversation answer as well, because it's the reality of your situation. So, well, dude, it's wow. We've talked about so many things, and there's so many areas that I know that we will probably have to come back to, and we can maybe even do another episode on some of the different areas, because I know we can talk for hours and hours on these different things. But I guess what I wanted to really just give you the opportunity to do is, if there was like one thing that you would leave with the audience from this conversation, or just in general, and you could leave one thing with them, what would that be?
If you have not started anything new, go and start it, and start as small as you possibly need to. The 1 minute rule, the 10-minute rule has completely changed my life. Yeah. I'm going to write just one sentence a day. After you and I talked, and we talked about the consistency and like watching the blog drop off, I was like, I have to fucking get back to it. So I use I can write a blog and it can be one sentence, but it has to get done. And then a lot of the time it's more than that. I'm going to run every day for 10 minutes. Almost every day it's more than 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I in AA, I've not done AA, but I listen to Ritual a lot, and he talks about how like you can't diagnose something that you don't have.
Yeah.
You can't inspire people to be better if you're not better yourself.
Yeah. So
like once you start, you are immediately ahead of people that haven't started yet.
100%.
Yeah.
It's really good advice, and it's actually so simple that it sounds stupid, right? Because but it is so powerful, right? Because same thing is like me starting a podcast, me starting my journey. with the reselling and even getting onto YouTube. If I never started, I could never get to where I wanted to be. If anything, I look back and think, oh, where would I have been if I actually started this when I had the original idea, right? And, you wait 3-4 years before you even take action on it. And I think it's breaking it down to those smaller things of what can I do that's small enough that gets me moving, that gets me on, that snowballing progress, because over time,
Yeah.
as you said, naturally you're just doing more of it and it just comes it comes easier. I'm not saying it's easy, it just comes easier. So dude, that's some powerful good advice, and I challenge everyone to make sure you do take action, do some homework, and actually do it, because I guarantee you that if you do it, that you would thank Jon for that advice, because over time it just outweighs everything so much. Okay, the other thing that I need to get from you, man, is where can the listeners, where can the audience find you? Where's the best place for them to follow along? Is it Instagram? Is it YouTube? Is it both? Where do you want them to go?
I think I would prefer people to go to my YouTube channel. It's JonKuhn. The glass blower Jon Kuhn is much more popular than me, but the long-haired guy who's got his hands in like a prayer meditative state, that is me. Give that a follow. If you like any of those videos, there are links to the relationship podcast that my fiance and I do in a lot of the show notes, and my Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is the top of the funnel that I would prefer people to go to.
Perfect. And of course, everyone, this is in the show notes. This is in the description below. So go check it out. Follow all his content, right? Start with his YouTube, but across all his different mediums, he's doing some great and wonderful stuff. Well, Jon, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. And I know there's so many more things that we probably could have dived into, but I think that's just the beauty of, who you are and the type of human being that you are, that you bring so much great conversation, so much perspective, and, different perspectives that I think helps us challenge, the ways that we probably traditionally look at things. And that comes from you putting in the work, living life, going through experience, and now being willing and open to share it, right? And that's easier said than done, to be able to open up and challenge things and, not care what other people are thinking. So I really do appreciate it. And you being on this podcast is all because of you and the content that you create. So I can't emphasize enough for people to go jump over and have a look at your stuff. So mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nate. The pleasure is all mine. My brain just kind of like stuttered, like a slipping transmission in a car. But no, legitimately, the pleasure is all mine. I'm beyond humbled that you even asked me to do this, and you've taken time out of your busy life, your precious life to spend with me. It's honestly amazing. And if you're still listening to this, look, even if you have 1 million subscribers and you do a podcast with somebody, you're only talking to that person. That is never going to change. Always be where your feet are.
Yeah, some more good advice. Well, really do appreciate it, Jon. And yeah, you have a wonderful day, man. Cheers.
You too, mate. Bye.
So there you go. What an awesome episode, and how cool is Jon? I mean, Jon brings so many different things, right? He's doing his running, he's doing his YouTube, he's a videographer, he has a business in there, he's doing blogging, he's doing podcasting, and he used to do comedy, and there's so many things that he's doing. And I think, without me trying to pull apart and dive into all the things that we've just discussed, I first want to really encourage you all to jump over to his YouTube channel, and this is in the description below, and he did mention it as well. Go over there, have a look, see what he's all about, see what he's doing, because his content is short and sweet, and it's different for everyone. And I think it also brings some fresh perspective for everyone in a different way or another. So that would be my first thing I suggest you go do. But, the key takeaway for me in this episode was simply just the conversation, and being able to have a deeper conversation around some of the, more challenging and overwhelming questions, and I guess topics that I guess we all ask ourselves at some point. And that is really about, how do we define purpose, or how do we find purpose, and how do we live a life of purpose? And diving into that, I think it's really, really great to be able to have that back and forth, understanding different perspectives, and hopefully there has been something in this episode which you've been able to take away. Of course, I would encourage you to reach out to myself, reach out to Jon if you do have more questions, or if you have some curiosity, as Jon really does love the curiosity side of things. And I think that is also another key takeaway, is exploring that, seeing where it takes you, and seeing what opportunity can come to life. So it's been an absolute honor to be able to have this conversation between you and Jon, and to bridge this connection. And once again, I cannot emphasize enough to go see what he's doing. Check out his content. All the links are in the description below, and you can see him on Instagram, YouTube, Medium, all those great places. So I really do appreciate you being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. My name's Chris Furlong. I am your host, and you have a wonderful day. Cheers. Now, if you didn't know, we do have the podcast merch, and this is with a key focus of enamel pins. Now, if you haven't checked these out, make sure you do, because the intent of these are really just to be a small token and a reminder for you to charge on, to push on, and to further your lifestyle. Whether it is a gift for someone else to encourage them, or maybe to inspire them, or maybe it's a way to motivate yourself, or you can simply just make a purchase to simply support the podcast, which would be greatly appreciated. We do also have some sweaters and some long tees, so make sure you check it out. Link in the description and in the show notes. Really do appreciate it. Cheers.